Oh, welcome. I'm incredibly excited to have the three of you on stage, three of the most experienced execs in the business. So let's start by diving straight in. James, you just heard what Brian had to say. What do you see as the most important factors changing the marketplace at the moment? What's really moving the dial from your point of view? Give us a sense of where we are today. What's shifting?
Well, Brian is outstanding as always, and now he's in the front row. I can talk about him. I think, Brian, I strongly disagree with you that people don't like advertising. As an advertising executive, I have to say that. But I say it because I think there's always going to be a world of AVOD and SVOD. And I think it's true that households can reallocate dollars from elsewhere to buy lots of standalone subscription services, but the economics, I don't think, make sense for the majority of America. And I think that's why the great unbundling will be a great rebundling, and the bundle will just look sort of very, very different. And I think it's on the advertising industry from an experience standpoint to make that ad experience make a lot more sense, where that trade-off relative to paying out of pocket, sort of the first thing. The second thing is, it was interesting, and I think it's the right point, that, of course, the definition of TV is defined however your motivations lead you. I mean that by, of course, there's a decline in linear TV, and that's going to continue. And it will continue to a point, but there's always going to be a world where people are going to get over-the-air broadcasts and others. But ultimately, 10 plus years from now, everything's going to be IP delivered, or the majority will be IP delivered, and it's all just going to be video. So, there's a false narrative out there about it's streaming versus traditional TV. No, as a marketer, you want to reach your audience wherever they are, and nearly 60% of households have both streaming and traditional, and then there's traditional only and streaming, and the goal is to deduplicate across those and reach that audience in the most efficient way. The thing that's troubling for me is when we talk about platforms like TikTok or Meta or YouTube and what sits behind YouTube with Google Video Network, etc., then there is an uneven playing field right now with regard to how video is measured. And I think that is to the detriment of marketers. And what I mean by that is, if we're going to expand the definition of video, and we should, then I think there should be a sort of set of rules that apply to everyone, not the tech companies having one set of rules applying to how they are treated versus traditional media as others. And by that, I mean there needs to be transparency about where ads run. There needs to be acceptance that not all impressions are created equal, in environment and context matters. And the audience needs to be validated that it's an actual audience versus things like made for advertising sites and bots and XYZ. Otherwise, you're going to have, as Brian said, an over-allocation of dollars moving to digital platforms, but that isn't necessarily going to deliver the results that the marketer wants. Hence, I strongly agree with the point around outcomes. We need to redefine what an outcome is, and the outcome isn't just bottom of funnel. It's across the consumer purchase funnel. So those would be my comments on Brian's presentation.
Great way to kick us off. I would like to draw everyone's attention as well to the presence of Sean Cunningham from the VAB, who will be attending to present later this afternoon, giving a fascinating and, dare I say it, somewhat provocative presentation, which speaks to at least some of what James has just been saying about transparency. He does have a POV, which if you've read his recent editorials, you'll be somewhat familiar with. But he's going to do an amazing data-driven presentation talking about some of these issues, which is a great setup for our governance panel. Andrea, hi. Thank you for letting us use your building.
Oh, yes, welcome to the WBD house, at least a couple of floors here. It is gorgeous. Happy Tuesday to you all, and I'm glad you're here.
So you heard most of what Brian had to say. Give us your sense. Where do you think we're on the marketplace? Are there things Brian said that you really strongly agree with? Are you things we're on a slightly different page? Give us your perspective and reaction.
So one, I just want to say I have mad respect for Brian. I've been reading you since I was like, yay tall, and always thought you were sort of ahead of the curve on many things. And actually, I want to build a little bit off of what James is saying. And what is so fascinating about this moment in time is that, yes, viewers have been dictating the fragmentation since the moment that they could, right? As in, like, if you can watch great content on a phone, guess what? They're going to watch great content on a phone, and we're not going to be able to count it and link it back to a television set. Now TV's back where TV belongs, which is on a great big screen in your living room or your basement or, in front of your bed in your room. And people are watching sight, sound, motion, great content whenever they want, where God intended. You hear me say that a lot, but on a big screen, right? It's the best available screen in which to watch content. For us, though, what's changed and what is so wonderful about this moment in time is that how, at least this is a research measurement conference, is how we count, how we value, how we think about capturing the viewership towards an audience, whether it be a blunt metric like 25 to 54, which is what marketers want because they still need to reach lots of people in a short window of time, or whether it's using whatever's on that big television set and getting maybe a bit more targeted, which we can now do because of data, right? You sit at the House of Comcast Advertising and you have set-top box and you can augment it to be much more nationally representative using ACR. That allows us to, again, do more things with our supply, with our audience who's engaging with our beautiful content because WBD, we're in the business of creating beautiful stories. Whether it's going to be, and we pull rankers all the time on television, we pull rankers all the time on it's happening in streaming, and good content's good content, debatable content's debatable content, but viewers want to watch what they want to watch, and they want to watch it where they want to watch it. And now we just sit in a place where we can say, there's more data that's ever happened. There's more data at our fingertips. Frankenmetrics, God bless them, they're never going away, right? Because we have a responsibility to stitch viewership together, not wait for perfection, lean into better measurement now, give really valid feedback on how to improve it, and then ultimately get to what I think you care about, which is, did it work, right? Did they see my ad? Did they like my ad? Did they frickin' buy my ad? And we're getting better at that. And this is like our moment, I think, to really think about how we want to see that foundation grow. Because if you remember, only like 2 years ago or 3 years ago, we were still only beholden to a panel. That's long gone. And that's a great testament to the good work many people in this room are doing and the innovation in technology. So I don't know. What was your question? I know.
Yeah.
It's so early.
I've lost track as well. I was listening.
I'm on LA time and I was just like, oh.
I think those are amazing reflections on what Brian had to say. So I'm going to come back because I want to dive in to talk a bit about the streaming linear integration and transition issues that we're all grappling with. But I'll come back.
Yeah, that's great.
Let's get some initial reflections from Barrett. Barrett, how did you work with Brian beforehand? Just so we know, what was your professional relationship?
So my team in research would provide data points to Brian as he does his forecasts. And, when we have conversations around industry developments, we agree and we disagree.
You enabled him.
We work together in a way that makes for a better output, right, for clients. So that's the better way to say. So yeah, there's stuff there on the slides that, I may not necessarily agree with, but that's the whole point of it. At least we have the conversation. So yeah.
So give us a sense, Ben. Which bits, chime strongly with your perspective on the next 5 years? Where do you have a slightly different opinion?
I think the fact is that the dollars have moved out of TV to social and YouTubes of the world. Measurement is now catching up. And when that unified reach and frequency happens, you will see that this erosion is definitely happening. We'll be able to better measure it, ascribing the right values for device, content type, et cetera. Clients tend to be conservative in nature. That's the other thing we agree on. But again, we have a portfolio of clients, right? For every CPG that reaches everybody, you have the new age app companies that have started in digital and now are using brand building and video for that. I agree that outcomes as we know it is going to take a longer time. It's not here. I mean, every media owner has their own stack for outcomes and it's tough. It takes a long time. But as a client, if I want to scale something across 5 media owners, then that's a lot of hard work that needs to be done. There will be consolidation in the space. Again, what time frame? Given enough time, everything comes true. So I'm trying to be mindful of. So if we're talking till 2030, which is where we're going to be, I think every piece of media will be better optimized towards outcomes. Some of these outcomes, click-throughs, conversions, some of them are brand building, right? There are brands in the inflationary environment who still charge a pricing premium. That's the legacy that they have as marketers. So I think there are lots of points we agree on, but he is more cautious about the adoption of alternate currencies, and that might not be the sentiment we feel on the ground, for sure. So those are some of the things that we, and consolidation again. I think in the future you will see a tech company picking up one of the linear companies. You might see CNN and New York Times getting together, right? We don't know, but I wouldn't exclude those I wouldn't just look at this bucket of linear, so-called linear companies, and the marketplace is much bigger than that.
Okay, some initial thoughts. Right, let's deep dive into a few thoughts about the future. So, James, starting with you. You mentioned during your opening remarks that you are very much, as far as I understand it, in the camp that says we are shifting to an all IP market. Tell us a bit more about that. What does that, is that the future we should be planning for, in your view, a world in which all of Andrea's brilliant content is essentially delivered via an IP stream? Or actually is the world going to be more hybrid for the foreseeable future? What's your take?
Well, it's definitely, to your point, everything will be true eventually. We will be all IP at some point. I mean, I don't.
Is that 5 years or 20?
No, I think it's more than 5, more than 7, probably more than 10. But we will get there. And so for all of us who have careers in this space, we have chosen inadvertently a time to work in the industry that is incredibly messy and complex and hard. And we are going to have to manage through a hybrid world for a long time. That's my belief. And that means that the theme of complexity and fragmentation and messiness will be the theme that we live through, because underpinning the converging of different worlds, I love the point made that around media and tech companies, like media companies are trying to build stronger technology muscles, and technology companies are trying to build stronger media muscles, which is interesting because ultimately that reflects in a world of video, how you bring the best of what traditional media companies have, which is safe, sort of scaled, brand safe, good context environments, with measurement, whether you like it or not, it's consistent. And tech companies bring better targeting, simplicity to buy, attribution, etc. But they both got their flaws. And so, the ideal scenario is how you bring the best of those two worlds together. But underpinning that are different tech stacks, different endpoint capabilities, different measurement, different incentive structures, different workflows, different policies, and different motivations. So it is really, really messy out there. And that means that the advertising supply chain is clunky. There's less, I think, working media than there should be for marketers because of it. There's more opaqueness than there should be. That goes back to my opening point around how tech companies are treated to a different standard than traditional media, and they're trying to equivalize all impressions to be the same, which is just simply not true. And then if you move from the advertising side to the consumer side, the theme for me of complexity and fragmentation holds true in that as a consumer, it is so hard to search, discover content, and to navigate content. It's ridiculous. And this ties to sort of the work that Comcast is doing with Xumo, which is underpinned by Comcast Global Entertainment Operating System, is how do we sort of make TV simple again? And that is really that a consumer doesn't care where the content is coming from. They just want to watch it. And right now there's a massive fragmentation and complexity issue from a consumer experience. So I sort of think about where we are and living in this hybrid world, both through the lens of the world that we operate in, the sort of advertising value chain, and then through the consumer lens as well. And both, I think, are messy and will be for a long time.
And just briefly on the Xumo box, Xumo seems to me really interesting because it's a great example of how this transition is stimulating competition and innovation, which ultimately should be good for both consumers and advertisers. The box is obviously out of footprint, so anyone across the entirety of the USA, as long as they have a broadband connection, can become a customer, right? And that means that you are able to move out of the kind of cable footprint to reach other customers who now have far more choice than they used to have. And that should lead to better products, better experiences, more access to great content, better interfaces, and so on and so forth.
Yeah, that's right. I think if you think about operating systems and you think about operating systems in mobile or browsers for the web, etc., for TV operating system, it is unclear how that plays out right now. There's the smart TV providers, the Samsungs, the LGs of the world who have their play. There are the tech companies that have their operating system play. And then there's the Comcast of the world who have their operating play. And each of us are coming at it from a different set of historic experiences and capabilities, I guess, approaching it from how the economics play out differently. But Comcast is sort of very clear that what we're trying to solve is, again, sort of making TV simple, again, which is what we've done historically, just on sort of, in an old world of cable. It's how do you sort of reinvent the simplicity for the consumer of how they access that content on a sort of IP background with a very different sort of operating system experience. That's the opportunity in front of us. And Charter, I think, sees it the same way, which is why Charter and Comcast have sort of partnered on the venture together.
So, Andrea, the environment James has described is the environment that WBD is now operating in, clearly, and the journey you've been on is the same journey as pretty much every other big TV business, which is to create a business that can make linear and streaming work incredibly well together for both advertisers and for audiences. Tell us about what you've learned about how that does work. Do they both work well? Do they deliver more of what Barad and his clients want in a better way? Or are we still in that transition where we're getting there, we can see the direction of travel, and ultimately this will lead to a kind of superpowered TV industry where linear and streaming together deliver opportunities, possibly have a risk of some fragmentation, as Brian pointed out, but it's all good. Tell us a bit about that journey.
So the journey. The superpower sort of scares me a little bit. I think that, when I hear someone like James speak in Comcast, it makes perfect sense, right? We're in the business of creating great content, storytelling, and, amassing audiences at scale. And you're in the business of making sure that audience can view it, right? Obviously, linear is, we hit the tipping point 2 years ago. I think if we look at the Nielsen gauge, we won't see a point anymore where linear is the mass consumption of which people are watching content. But they're still watching more TV than they ever have before, right? I mean, how we do this is incredible, but sight, sound, motion, storytelling, we're still human in our very being, and we want to be entertained. To the point of like, how is it that the WBD, our responsibility is at the end of the day to be able to capture those audiences in as accurate and as scaled a way as possible. So if linear is declining, and I don't think it's going to completely go away. I mean, I think of the fact that I think a third of all households still has a telephone, right, that has something connected. I don't know. Obviously we're not one of those households, but I think that but I have family that are still some of those households, and they think they'll continue to be that way. So I just say this because I think that we're still going to need visibility into a linear environment. And at WBD, we don't have access to that data. We are beholden to either those that license the Comcast datas of the world, and we can license it ourselves. But the data is, and then we have obviously our streaming. And I know, again, in a privacy compliant way, that is sort of like the richness of having a world where we're now in streaming. But deduping it is still very, very hard. I hope at some point we can get to a holy grail where that Venn diagram of only both becomes sort of much easier for us to provide, because that's the least interesting part of our business. It's simply a counting exercise, but it's very, very important for the planning exercise that we talked about earlier. It allows you to make smart investments and allocations when you're placing your buys. But I just say this because I think, ultimately, while we're beholden, for us, it's really about making sure that what we can do now with the bigger data sets is important. We have to be realistic that eyeballs are still being watched in a place where, at least at WBD, again, we have very little visibility, but then there's also the ability for us to actually get at more, to encourage the measurement systems out there, and to not only harness the bigger picture, because, and I see Kelly up here with JIC, and I just think about you in JIC, because I think you've been really good at pushing and saying we need to have greater visibility into what is happening in the land of streaming for all of these big media providers. But what I think is challenging is that it's still only a window of a piece of viewing that's happening across sight, sound, and motion, and it's not capturing the YouTubes of the world or the TikToks of the world or anything that's happening in the big technology companies. And so for us, it's going to be a matter of defining and saying, I joke, I can't dictate how you're ever going to place your buys. I can only demonstrate the said value of our offering, right? You're going to tell us ultimately, how do we want to do that better? Our job is to also make sure we're doing it in a privacy compliant way, in a way that is turnkey, in a way that is interoperable. And, Comcast sits here and you are one part of the pie, right? And we've got a lot of other partners in which to work with. And ultimately, we have to put together the picture that says, this is how our audience is scaling. You can see our audience versus somebody else's. And ultimately, what is that value? We're not there yet. And I do believe at some point, while we've learned a lot, we have learned more than we didn't know 2 years ago about what the big data could bring to the table, how we can get at broad audiences down to more of a granular audience, how we onboard those. We're getting there. It's just that we're more bullish than I think you are, Brian, about this, because we're in it and we have great relationships where we're willing to test and learn and actually place investments against alternative currencies. But no, we're still far away.
And the transition that for you and every other major media owner is so important at the moment is to see, as you would describe it, fair counting of impressions. You're involved with the JIC, and that's the big priority for the JIC. You obviously have your own measurement partnerships, which are also very much focused on letting a buyer come in and buy your linear and streaming inventory and understand the unduplicated reach and frequency of the campaign run across those two pools, right?
Yeah, but this is challenging. You have to then, if you have just viewership data, it means nothing, right? Unless you can actually attach it to an audience. You have to be able to have an identity attached to that. You have to be able to do this in a privacy compliance way. You've got to be able to not just onboard our audience with an identifier, but you've got to match it now to an advertiser. This is awesome. This is super fun stuff. This is like where, I think we got into the business at the best time, right? Because this is where we have the ability to actually demonstrate the full value of our television content. Even I'm learning the vernacular, right? But it goes back to, it's not easy. Nothing's easy. And we're all built differently. What WBD and where we sit and what our tech stack looks like is inherently different than what Disney's is going to look like or NBCU. And that's okay. We still bring beautiful content to bear, but how we're set up from a business structure is going to be different right now, because again, we're building. We're in build phase. And you have the luxury of being able to look back and say, who's where can we do with them versus someone else, right? And ultimately, how do you standardize what you can for today as we build towards the future?
So Barad, Andrew made lots of really interesting points about a kind of network view on this grand transition. Brian had a really interesting slide, which I know you've seen a million times before, which is the reach decline. And obviously the big challenge and opportunity for your clients is to capitalize on TV's undoubted strengths, but deal with the complexity of measurement when you're having to deal with these different pools of inventory, which are more widely distributed, to James's point. On balance, do you think TV is becoming a more or less effective advertising medium for your client?
Look, TV is still important. We may say TV is dying, and I speak strictly about linear TV, but people watch TV. It's the fastest way and the cheapest way to build reach. The trade-off is always between reach and price too, right? So if you want to build reach for the weekend, for a movie or for auto dealership, linear TV is still your base today. Will it be the same 2 or 3 years from now? Probably not. When you look at reach per se among younger audiences, top 25 DMAs, cord cutters, diverse audiences, then when you start segmenting, then you go, yeah, we do need to have streaming because streaming builds reach, right? So I'm paying for streaming a premium like I used to pay for Prime because it's bringing reach. NFL commands reach, right? Sports is doing so well. So it's the reach play, but linear is, people say linear is dead. The spends are down, viewership is down, but the base level of reach you get has not gone away yet, right? And from ads, a lot of the streaming apps, if you look Netflix and Prime, they may have scale, but from advertising purposes, we really can't advertise that much yet, right? So there is that piece also to it. So it hasn't gone away, but there are clients who spend more money on social video than they do on TV itself, including linear and CTV. Right? And for those clients, their frustration is that the measurement is still so linear TV first based, right? It's not based on where their dollars are. And that, I think, is the problem that we should be hopefully solving in the next 12 months.
And briefly, you mentioned, sorry, I come to Andrew, but you mentioned that you were a bit more bullish than perhaps Brian was on the improvements delivered by the multi-currency marketplace. Tell us a bit about what kinds of improvements you're seeing.
I think competition is always good, right? So anytime you have monopoly, good or bad, that's true in the UK with the JIC, in other markets in the US. Pace of innovation slows down a bit because you're too busy dealing with stakeholders there. So I think competition is good. The change we've seen in the last 2 years is historic. When I look at other parts of the world and see where their research is, they're actually looking at the US to see what they can learn. That was not the case till 2020, literally, right? This was a backward market from measurement perspective in that sense. So there are a lot of innovation there. New capabilities are being developed, a lot of changes. There are stacks now being built that look at viewership and also attribution that's coming into play. So there's a bunch of things. Specifically, I also want to talk about the ANA's cross-media measurement, which is a client-led initiative. It's the elephant in the room nobody's talking about when we talk about outcomes and marketers having a single source of truth to optimize their investments. That's also an exciting development in this marketplace.
Andre, you wanted to come in?
No, I do. I was just wanted to comment because he's like, there's this the idea of CTV and the ad experience in CTV, right? And you're like, there's not enough supply.
It's terrible. I mean, everybody talks about CTV ad experiences. I have Netflix that's ad supported. It's not great. And
that's on us, right? And I think that's the opportunity because it goes back to, we can continue to put 5, 6, 7 ads per pod. Why would we ever do that? If we can control for it and demonstrate that if you have 1, 2, 3, or a branded interstitial or brought to you by a very different creative experience in the CTV environment, it is actually more impactful. It's more effective to the viewer and for the brand, right? And I think that ultimately it goes back to our ability to create better ad experiences. You said people don't like ads. I think they don't like ads when there's a whole bunch of them in between a show and it's just intrusive and it becomes muddied. I think that there's opportunity for us to reimagine it. In fact, it's our responsibility to reimagine it and not just do what we've always done. But the reason why we put often these many ads per pod is because that's how television has been bought and sold inherently. And people are looking to basically translate metrics. And again, that isn't the correct way to use this technology and this consumer experience, especially when it's around beautiful TV content. And I think that's the most exciting thing for us in the future. Yes, how we count, how we demonstrate efficacy, but ultimately we have to get the ad experience right. And we're all going to do it slightly different. And I think that's going to bring different value back to the brands, right? So anyway, I just think it's a very interesting moment in time and we often skip over it, but we're in the ad business and we absolutely are in control. Yes.
One of the challenges is in a world of signal deprecation, plus a world of greater activity in DC and at state level on how data can be used, and on top of a world where first-party data becomes more important and therefore there are more mini walled gardens on top of the existing walled gardens, and in a world where it's unrealistic, I think, to think there's going to be a single unified identifier. you're going to have to be able to work across multiple data gardens against a backdrop of greater state and federal regulation of how data is used in order to be able to better manage the ad experience from a sort of Group M level, as an example, across different media owners as you look to deliver the audience that you want into different publishers. That is really, really hard.
You just define the role of the agency of the future, right? Or even today, depending on the client. There are so many walled gardens, and privacy is that couple of things that people are not talking about is privacy is a big one. It's going to hurt us all from the way we look at measurement. And the role of the agency literally becomes to create the bridge or a crosswalk across these walled gardens so we can help clients.
And this is why clean rooms are so critical, would you say? I know Group M is heavily invested, and we have one of your colleagues speaking about clean rooms later on. Do you say them as a critical foundational building block for the future of the ad?
Measurement is shifting, right? So yes, it is going to be, but not today right away. Some clients, yes, but for a lot of clients, TV is not used for that purpose. And some clients would argue that, digital, we haven't done ourselves any service. If TV goes like digital and ads chases all over, oh my God. So it takes time, and some clients will lean in first, and some clients will follow.
That's also though on us to. I mean, us. I say the content creators. We have the ability to evangelize and demonstrate what's possible, right? I think that is completely within the wheelhouse of us educating along with you, because yes, it's our data clean rooms. They're not scaled yet, right? Not everybody's willing to bring their first party data to marry to our first party data to then actually execute and target and optimize and do all the things, right? But it's possible now, right? And that wasn't possible before. And again, television, especially in the linear environment, has been such a disservice, for so long. And you know this because we've been talking about audience for so long. And I think about the fact that we were just bought so bluntly, right? Age, gender, we were leaving so much on the table because you can get more data-driven in that environment. And there is still tons of scale and reach there. And it can augment what you're doing in streaming or vice versa, right? And it goes back to that media mix. And that's one thing that I'm really glad that Brian put up there. I think we gloss over that a lot. The media mix is so valuable because at the end of the day, that's what the advertiser has, the client has. They're in control of how do they want to allocate their investment? Do they just need an awareness play? No, nobody just needs an awareness play, right? They need an awareness play mixed with a frequency play that allows that recall to go into consideration that then eventually goes down into conversion. And what's great about WBD and our friends in the industry is that we are now capable of doing all of these things. And until we can actually demonstrate that our offering hits all of those boxes, data clean rooms will be one avenue for that media mix. A GRP will be one other component, right? And there'll be something else that we've got to get in there that I think is going to be very interesting and hopefully a more interesting ad experience in streaming that will demonstrate even greater efficacy, right? But at the end of the day, the fact that we can even have conversations like this is really valuable. And it's on us as an industry to continue to tell the story of what's possible in great storytelling content environments that maybe we haven't told in the past.
So we've got 2 minutes left and we have 3 questions. We're going to go fast, okay? So number 1, really quick, if we can manage it, 1 sentence answer. One of the big things Brian said is that straight, simple, demo-based ad buys are going to be a declining proportion of TV ad spend. I think he was quite bullish on advanced audiences. Are you on the same page? Are we, 2030?
I strongly agree. I think it's a move from securing demos, whether it's on an upfront model or elsewhere, to securing audiences, and those audiences depending on what the marketer wants. So I strongly agree with Brian on that.
Andrea, I'm guessing you agree.
There's going to be a balance, though. You need one and you need the other. I mean, it's called the media mix.
Right. Barad?
I think there will be more towards data-driven and addressable audiences, but the shift is going to be gradual.
Next question. Brian was noticeably quite bullish, I thought, about the persistence of the upfronts. I have to ask Andrea, and then I go to James. Andrea, you're on the same page. For as long as they serve a need, which is to provide you with some booked revenue and advertisers access to scarce inventory, we're going to have an upfront. What's your take?
I'm no head of sales, but yes, I do think that there is great value in the upfront, especially when you create the kind of content that we do. So I don't see that going away. Why was it so long this past year? If we can make it a little bit shorter next year, that'd be great. But yes, I don't think it's going away for a while.
James?
The reason an upfront exists in media is no different than sort of forward contracts in other markets is if there is scarcity and scarcity of quality, then marketers want to secure quality. Now that's going to be against more data-driven audiences versus something else. But I agree in that. How the machination of the upfront looks and what the terms are and all those things will evolve. But I'm a obviously fan of this gentleman as well. And you wrote something about 6 weeks ago around even in a world where if there is even declining viewership and total viewership of video that comes from our end of the ecosystem, because there's more competition for dollars for video elsewhere, the quality will win out eventually. The challenge for this room, because we're at a measurement conference, is we have to demonstrate that quality, which gets to next generation outcomes and redefining those outcomes. Because right now, too many dollars are being allocated to bottom of funnel performance marketing because they are capturing all the video, the value from higher funnel tactics, and that means a redefinition of the media mix model to sort of deliver the credit that is required, which I think will balance things better in the future.
But the final word from you, if there's one thing, given everything we've spoken about, that you'd like to see the industry coming together in the next 12 months to sort out, what would you like us to sort out?
I think a universal acceptance of a couple of alternate currencies would be good. I think we'll get there.
Ladies and gentlemen, that was the future of measurement, currency and trading.